Welcome to the Going Green podcast, and today we're going to have a look at forecasts for 2024, and this looks like it's going to be our first chance to make 1.5 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial levels.
Uh, uh, what? Surely we should be staying away from that.
Let's have a discussion about that. First chance of getting 1.5 degrees ought to be something we shouldn't be celebrating, but it's certainly looking like it's on the cards.
Yeah. So as stated, one of the things is it's the average global temperature, or at least the forecast for what the global temperature could be in the year 2024, as in the block average for the entire year.
Now, I thought we were aiming for that for about 2050.
Apparently that was a goal, and it's not going to make it. It's one of those things where we were talking a long time ago about sort of keeping this 1.5 alive, and there were reports that basically what was going to happen, or could happen, or should be happening, is that we actually do arrive at 1.5, and then of course we stay at 1.5, and then we go back, go down, as in we sort of almost like leveling off the curve and then falling back down it. That was the ultimate goal, sort of 1.5, because of course we decided 1.5 instead of 2, and that was done by lots of different modeling, and basically 1.5 was hot and a problem but salvageable, as opposed to, say, 2 degrees. This is 2 degrees of global above
Pre-industrial levels.
whatever the global warming stuff is. And the answer was how less livable 2 degrees was, or even 3 or 4, huge forecasting they did. And they decided that 1.5 was the level that they could aim for. Now, they're not saying that we wouldn't hit 1.5, that we never said that. Well, the idea was we weren't never going to hit it, but they said, but the chance of actually hitting it, and the answer was we don't want to hit 2. And so, as I said, we go up, we level off at approximately 1.5, and then, of course, then we come back down the other side of the slope. And we have some bad news.
Yeah. It looks like then, if pessimistic reports are looked at, then we're going to make about 1.4, probably more like 1.46. But if we go in the trend that we've had, that every year seems to be getting hotter, and that's what we've had for the last few years, then 1.5, or sort of even higher than 1.5, possibly even 1.58, is sort of definitely on the cards. And this came out from a reasonably reputable source, which is the UK Met Office, who really do know what they're talking about. Records go back in the UK to, we were looking up, 1600 and something.
It was 1660, I say approximately. They said they weren't as diligent in writing the dates. However, they were, it was fine in relation to sort of getting the things. And they've got 3 sites that they used to record dates at. And
called the Central England Temperature Series, taken in 3 places in the UK, which is a place called Stonyhurst in Lancashire. It's Rothamsted in Hertfordshire, near where we live, and Pershore in Worcestershire, sort of very central England, to give a 400 years of weather records, which is longer than sort of
most other places have been recording. So, we've got this data set, and as I said, they've been writing this report probably, and due to a release when COP was out, to basically startle the COP attendees into doing something, but we'll glance over that in regards. But no, but they saying that there are two things that are happening, and that's why next year in 2024 we are going to hit uh, basically a temperature of in the range of with the in the, with and the direct midpoint. So they're calculating where the midpoint of the temperature range is for the year because it's complicated forecast, but I understand it from the report, not necessarily how they physically got there. But they're saying that their midpoint of the average of the temperature will be sort of 1.46, which means, of course, that on a hot day we could be going up, down. That's their forecast. Anyway, um, but what they're saying is that because we're having a significant, is it El Nino? Yes, El
Yeah.
Nino. I was trying to work out whether it was like Sal Nino or something. No, but a significant El Nino this year, or at least starting up this year, so that next year actually going in full force because it takes the time to cycle up and cycle down. That that's actually contributing to the significant boost to the temperature signal, as in the temperature rise, than other years where it hasn't been as strong.
Well, we've been seeing about a 0.2 degree rise every decade, and we're not far from sort of 1.5 at the moment. So this is well in keeping, unfortunately, with all the predictions. So 1.5 is probably going to happen this year, and we'll probably just reach it and then, as Paul said, go down a little bit. But then the following year and the following year after that, we're going to be probably steady at 1.5. And that's the bad news. And it doesn't seem to have reached our political masters. Doesn't matter which country you seem to sort of live in. Um, all of them seem to be doing the ostrich effect and not
Yes.
worrying about this and worrying about important things like money.
Yeah, well, it's as I said, it's one of those things where it's hard to actually panic about these things because it's sort of like we're rising, we're getting used to that temperature going up, and as I said, there's all these forecast predictions of what the sort of temperature things, but they're only forecasts. People go, ha humbug, they're only forecasts. How can we believe they're true or significant? And there's lots of people deniers out there, not necessarily denying climate, but denying necessarily how bad the forecast will be. Because of course
Well,
it's
some
only
of them still say that change isn't happening. It's all due to other various things, and you know, they people don't seem to understand the difference. Probably you do, but a lot of people don't seem to know the difference between climate and weather. Weather goes up and down like a yo-yo. You only have to live in the UK to know that you know some days we can have all four seasons in just one day, no problem at all. So that can be sort of good
but
fun
as a stating say so weather or is the everyday
every
climate
day. Yep.
is more the whole year, and this is where, don't get me wrong, as a species we're very bad at sort of looking at the overall and sort of the entire year, because of course we see the seasons, we say, oh, it was chilly that day or it was warm that day, but they don't see that sort of it was on the chilliest day, it was hotter, warmer than last year's
Chilliest day. Yeah.
chilliest day. Yeah, it's welcome to we look why we look like looking at statistics and things to and recording all this information down so we can look at these patterns.
Well, even looking at that central England temperature, people look at that and they make up all sorts of things and say, "Oh, the temperature, yeah, during the last 2 decades hasn't continued to rise. It's gone down some years." Yeah, yeah, because it's an average. We are seeing an average going up, but going up consistently.
Yes, and it's one of those even bizarre things that inside those large climate models of, as I say, if we go up by 2 degrees, and so they actually predicted that the UK would actually go down in temperature. because we're not being warmed by as much from the Atlantic and the continent, just how things go. And so, bizarrely, us going down is actually an indication that the big climate model predictions are actually correct, or in regards to they predicted we would go down, and now we're seeing we actually do go down. It's a bit odd, say, because we are going up, but we're also going down.
Well, what we're seeing is things like the ice caps melting, global warming. It's making the ice caps melt. But that cold water's got to go somewhere. And a lot of it, sort of, we're lucky, is coming our way. And that is making, in theory, for a cooler um, sea and probably a cooler climate for us, whereas warmer for everyone else. However, last year, the ocean temperatures around the UK were significantly warmer
Yes.
than they've been for many years.
So yeah, so this is where the point of going is that you see all these other effects and other predictions, and they are slowly, unfortunately, coming true. And that's one of the reasons why not we looked at all these things, but this is why the evidence is there, and we're sort of saying it's not sort of well. These if this thing happens, then we're on this course. It's not like that at all. It is these models update and they predict and they sort of try to predict as far as they can, but it, we don't know what's happening because the issue we're having is that the temperature is increasing at a faster rate, not than the models predicted, but than the models can cope with. Because as we said, we were estimated to hit 1.5 degrees of global temperature rise on average on by 2050. We've hit that, or we're going to be hitting that in the next couple of years.
But one of the things it's important to try and work out is that is this going to be a breach of the Paris Agreement? And in fact, it probably won't, because if we just temporarily go up to 1.5 and then go back down again, then the Paris Agreement hasn't basically been breached.
Yeah, so as in that regard, as I said, that mean average temperature band or the temperature is 1.46. So that's the temperature, or the average mean average temperature. The midpoint of the average temperature is 1.46. So on occasionally, a couple of days, we could be hitting that 1.5,
Or more than a couple of days, I think. Yeah.
or yeah, whatever. And so we are hitting, unfortunately, that breaking the limit. But because it's actually the global temperature,
But it is the global temperature that will go over 1.5.
yes,
But it is, not local places. So we're not looking here at what the UK is doing, what Paris is doing, what Germany's doing, what New York's doing. What we're looking at is global temperatures will exceed 1.5 for a while. Now, where's this data come from? Well, all this has been published in Nature. And if you want to go and read the articles, then you'll probably find the link in the text below. That's
yes,
a hint to Paul.
yeah, I know. And so there is all this out there and this thing, and of course, as you said, it's probably been released to in COP to sort of worry the attendees of COP to actually get the butt in gear and do things.
They need
They
worrying.
need worrying because, of course, not being unkind to the lovely leaders and the people at COP, but unlike say the one we've had a couple of years ago, not even COP 26, but even COP 27, there was quite a lot of things happening. This year's one, there hasn't been any good sort of news about. It's one of those unfortunate sort of COPs that are just not breaking any headlines. I'm sad to say that, but
Well, they made a couple of headlines, like all the wrong reasons. Of course,
well, yeah, that's a different.
that's something we may talk about in another episode.
Yeah.
But basically, last year, 2023, which is technically this year, I know, but the figures from January to October of this year the World Meteorological Office can see that the global temperature rise is 1.4 degrees C. And people have been talking about it being less than that. They've been talking about, oh, we're currently at 1.25, going up to 1.28, and they're wrong. And so this is sort of seeing that things are going to get worse. Yeah, the Met Office's forecast at the end of 2022 was sort of, well, we could get to a maximum of 1.32, and they had a central estimate of 1.2. 2023, they're now having to raise that quite a lot. And since we've had COP26 and everyone's going to do lots of things, we've actually seen everything rise. We've seen more CO2. We've seen more trees chopped down. We've seen more extreme weather events.
Yes, and that's the one of the critical points about all this increase in temperature, because they were talking about inside the increase in temperature. Of course, that means more basically sea levels rising, because of course that's the ice melting into the sea. And so they were saying that one of the things is there's more water in the atmosphere. And of course, more water means more rain, which then leads to, of course, then more precipitation, and subsequently then the more flooding, which, as people in England, we've seen in October, November, huge amounts of storms coming in and dumping a lot more rain than not anticipated, because we did predict they were going to be increasing the amount of water. But if you say look at the different storms every year, you'll see that the actual amount of precipitation caused by those storms is actually going up, because, of
Yeah.
course, there's more water in the atmosphere because there's the rising sea. Yeah, all these factors are attributing, and they are predicting sort of there is more, not more flooding to take place, but basically next year there will be increased flooding. I was reading once again, uh, Australia is on fire. I say once again. Uh,
It's not news, is it?
no,
Oh, it happened last year. Oh, it happened the year before. Oh, yeah, it'll happen next year as well. So, yeah, it's not news. Yet it is news. It's people's livelihoods. It's people's existence. And this is a really big problem that isn't being tackled. And people have been sitting back, basically, politicians have been sitting back saying, oh, yeah, well, let's not worry about this too much because it's 2050 when 1.5 is going to happen. And we've got plenty of time. We can organize doing this and we can keep our economy going and doing this, that, and the other. And, or we could perhaps delay going to this a little bit longer to try and help us. And climate isn't obliging, it's not slowing down. People are shoving more and more CO2 and other gases into the atmosphere. And that's helping us get this 1.5-degree rise, probably hitting it for the first time next year. And it's a bit like when we got to 40 Celsius in this country. A couple of years ago, we managed 40 degrees Celsius in one place. And then the year after, we managed 40 degrees Celsius over much of the country. We didn't achieve it this year.
well, no.
But 2024, well, we've just got to have the weather patterns set in a slightly different position, and we can easily make probably 40 degrees Celsius again. And these are sort of record breaking events. And these are things that we've been told sort of happen sort of once in 100 years, except our once in 100 years, we've done this before, is happening sort of every couple of years.
Yeah, and this is the whole crux about, say, climate and, say, climate forecasting and doing things about the climate, is it's taking effort to do things. But of course, you've only got to prepare for the 40 degrees temperature in the summer. So obviously, you need to prepare it in the summer. But in the winter, you don't need to panic about it. You need to panic about other things, but you're constantly trying to panic about all these things. And as I said, one of the major things they were talking about in relation to, say, the climate finance, all the things, is that dealing with, say, the flooding is going to cost you a lot more than if you just built a nice, simple flood defense. Because, of course, it's the act of prevention is way cheaper than dealing with the consequences of. And one of the things, of course, moving ahead is saying if you stop the global temperature rise, whatever way that happens, then that is easier to do now than it is later when it's harder to work. And better still, that you're not paying for, of course, all the damages as well as preventing. You can just pay for the prevention and save money on the damages. But it's hard to people to admit that because, of course, as I said, they need their economies going. They need, say, the dumb things like they need their not the country to grow, but they need their economies to be good and working. And I'm not saying that's wrong either, because this is the first time as a species we're dealing with this. So it's not sort of like we can go back and look in the history books and say, oh, they did that right, let's do that. We're making it up as we go along. And unfortunately, not that we're making it up and is bad, but we're struggling to actually not make it up successfully, but all the plans so far we've come up with needed to have two things. Firstly, have happened. And secondly, they need to be a lot of effort into making it happen. And surprisingly enough, people are going, let's do a little bit here, a little bit here. Let's not go far enough, or it's only a minor issue, and sort of we can't afford it now. We need to afford it in 5 years, or all these problems of not delay, but they're just not getting on with it, not doing things. They much rather talk about other things, sort of. Well, I say boring things. Uh,
Well, there are ways that things would have happened. For instance, let's suppose we didn't have the London Thames barrier. Then London would have got flooded a few times. Now, I would imagine that if our MPs in this country had gone into our Houses of Parliament and they had to paddle to go in, they would have actually have probably sorted out a lot of these things.
they would have done something.
Now, yeah, they would have done something because it would have affected them. And they're not seeing enough effects happening to affect them. And because it's out of sight, it's really out of mind, and they don't feel that they need to do something that urgently. There are towns in this country, Worcester, for instance, it's on the River Severn, and it regularly floods. And they've got flood defences, and it regularly sort of breaches these flood defences. And well, the MP for Worcester moans, but basically, if we'd moved the House of Parliament so they were sitting on the banks of the River Severn and they got flooded, I would imagine they would have done an awful lot more. And this is true of not just our country, of virtually every country. If the politicians were sort of being affected by these conditions, then they'd be up jumping about, stomping around, saying, we've got to do something. What happens, it's just the one in their region, their area, that gets up and shouts. And, well, in our country, that means there's probably a good 500 that aren't sort of doing that. And they say, oh, yes, sit down, shut up. We'll get on with the important business of making more money.
Or deciding something else. And it is that regional, not necessarily effect, but is that regional sort of bias in regards to, oh, it's only happening, the flooding's only happening here. But surely the flooding's happening always there. So perhaps that's something need to be looked at. And as a government or as a sort of, entity, people should be looking at it. And then it's sort of, right, well, we need to flood defences. Or let's go build some flood defences. Well, someone needs to say, well, how high, the flood defences need to be. And the answer is, oh, well,
Higher than you think.
higher than you think. But, we're not saying that. But all this planning that needs to take place before. And by the way, once you've done that planning for, let's say, raise it by a foot, you're saying it's now 2 foot above the original and you're planning only to build a foot. You need to actually go back and do not more planning, but go back and, and by the way, now you've done your another planning for 2 foot and it's now a foot high. And it's always this constant battle. So if they came in and actually did that 2 foot straight away, then there'd be everything. It is that sort
Yeah.
of decision making and planning that's not necessarily happening in that
Or
regard.
it is happening, but it's happening way too slowly. And the other one they're not planning for is, well, fires. What can they do about fires? Fires are raging out of control in some countries. And a couple of years ago, they managed to do that in this country. Doesn't happen in this country. Yes, it does. And as well as doing floods, we've got to think about other things, about fire. But
But
the point is, really, we're doing all these things, but we're not getting down to solving the problem, which is, can we start putting in negative carbon and basically take us back from this 1.5 where things are starting to get really bad and take us down to perhaps pre-industrial levels minus 1.5, and things would be a lot better and they'd have to spend a lot less money on other things.
yeah, and this is unfortunately the true crux of it all is that, as I say, prevention is cheaper than the I can't remember the wording.
Well, it's not the cure, but it's living
It's
with.
living with the idea of
Yeah.
all these things, and just unfortunate people don't see the not the wood through the trees, but it is seeing that the actual the forest that's on fire, and you're living in your small little wood, and they're not seeing the flames approaching, and they're saying, "Oh, it'll be all right. It won't reach us. We'll be, unfortunately, we'll be dead by then, and it will be our grandchildren's problem to solve
Yeah.
out. Yeah, just throw it down the line, and unfortunately, as the fire gets in, there won't be any opportunity to save it."
1.5 is almost certainly coming to a place near you. We're looking at 1.5 being breached in 2024. It might not do it. Keep our fingers crossed. It might not do it. But then if it doesn't do it in 2024, it will do it in 2025. It's not going to wait till 2050. It's coming, and it's coming much sooner than everyone predicted. People are saying, oh, all the data is wrong. It's being exaggerated. You're looking at this, that, and the other. Well, records don't lie. They are recorded. They've stayed there. We've got 400 years of evidence of temperatures moving up and down, and it's never moved up as much as it has in the last few years. We're looking at, over the last few years, more records being broken than for temperature than in any other period.
They were saying the last decade, it was quite and how many were broken in the last decade compared to this decade?
Yeah. So it's really getting sort of,
Not out of hand,
oh, it is.
but
I would have said it is getting out of hand, unfortunately. So we've got COP going on. We've got people there saying, oh, take it easy. Fossil fuels aren't the problem. Well, we need to get our politicians on the case and say, yes, these things are the problem. We need to do something about it, and we need to do something about it now, because instead of 2050, 2050 is coming to a place near you, either this year, coming year, or the next. You've been listening to the Going Green podcast, worrying about breaching 1.5 degrees Celsius barrier since pre-industrial levels next year, 2024. If you're worried, then come back and listen to us next time when we discuss more issues about going green. Until then, it's goodbye from me.
And a goodbye from me.
Bye bye.
Bye.